Okay. So it was Monday morning as the hurricane was passing. We were watching the water uh, from the marina. We were thinking that the water was going to come in from the marina side of the levee, and approximately 9 o'clock-ish in the morning, a couple of guys came from downstairs because where we were holed up was a second floor area of the condo tower. A couple of guys came from downstairs and said that the water was rising rapidly. Within the last 5 minutes, the water just came up real fast. So our first initial thought was that the water had came over the levee on the lake side near the marina. But as we were looking out the front of the towers face Lake Pontchartrain, we couldn't see where the water had came over the levee. So myself and Captain Joe Fincher got a pair of binoculars from one of the residents that were still there in the towers, and we went up to an elevated floor, a balcony, and I started searching the levee with the binoculars, looking at it, and I could see the cement wall and part of the green grass from the top of the levee. And as I was scanning, I could see the cement and the green, and then all of a sudden I see brown for about 10 feet or so, and then cement and green again. So I was like, Cap, the levee, it didn't overtop. I think the levee broke. And at that time, he went immediately to the radio to radio it in. And I was like, no, Cap, hold on. You look. I want a second set of eyes on what I think that I'm seeing. And, he verified that the levee had indeed breached and radioed that into our command center. So we could see like a block or two away in the backyard were a couple of boats that were floating. So we came up with a plan that if we could get to those boats, bring them back to the towers, we'd be able to get them started, and then we could go ahead and set out on search missions. Start getting out into the neighborhood and just seeing what we could do. So myself and another captain, Captain Helmers, we set out to swim to get the boats. When we finally got there, we had to cross one street, and the current was coming from right to left, and we had to swim at a 45-degree angle into the current just to make it to that same point right across the street because the water was moving so rapidly. When we finally got there, one of the boats had sunk, so we were kind of a little disheartened, but we were like, all right, well, one boat's still floating. We'll have one boat, and we'll just go from there. So we cut the boat off of the trailer and started towing it back between the houses. But then we realized that we have to cross this street that we just crossed to get there, and the current was so strong. So we were kind of figuring out how we were going to get the boat across that current. So we noticed that the power was out, or we were hoping the power was out, and there were some down power lines that were just floating in the water. So what we did was we just held onto the power lines and pulled ourselves across the street, towing the boat with a rope. And we were successful in getting that boat back to the condo, and some of the guys hot-wired the boat and got it started. And I would say within 10 minutes of us starting out on our little search mission, that's when we started finding our first victims. They were, on the roofs of the houses, hanging out the attic scuttles, up to their necks on their porches, just hollering and, crying for help. Day 2 or day 3 after the storm, we were just coming down the street in the boat, and it was obviously an area that we passed every single day. So it's like we kind of had already searched that area, but we were like, well, we're going to come back here one more time. And one of the guys just said, hey, look, there's a guy hanging onto a palm tree, in his front yard. And so I jumped into the water. We got him, assisted him to the boat. We had to physically pick him up into the boat because he was so weak. And he had a large laceration to his calf. And what we did was we brought him, we brought him to the Coast Guard station, which is right on the Jefferson Parish side of the levee. And that was actually dry. So we knew that we could get help to him, that he could get medical help. But what he told us was that he had been discharged from the hospital the day before Katrina hit because the hospital wasn't keeping any patients. So he had nowhere to go. So he went back to his house. That morning, when the levees broke, he said the water started coming into his house and he had about 1 to 2 minutes to make a decision. And he went straight up into his attic. He didn't have any means to chop his way out of his attic or cut his way out. So, but for 2 days in total darkness, he said he tried to pound his way out, try to break his roof from the inside. But on day 2, he said he had to make a decision whether he was going to live or not, because if he stayed in his attic, he was going to die. So he swam from his attic opening, broke out the front window on his front door. That's how he got the laceration. And the first thing that he came to hold on to was his palm tree. And we just so happened to be passing right at that time period. And he was, pretty weak. Obviously, he was a pretty elderly gentleman that had just got out of the hospital of a cardiac-related, problem. So pretty, that kind of be at the right place at the right time, for him.